Hey guys, it's Dean from Electronisounds. Stick around, we're going to talk about how I'm building all these live jams inside of Beatmaker 3.
That is wonderful.
Hey guys, little apology here. I shot all this footage before I realized that it was kind of a close-up on the scar of my post-surgery ear, so sorry about that. I found a workflow that is working really well for me for creating these live jams. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just taking one bank, I'm loading up a lot of one-shots into that bank, and I'm programming several different patterns, or what I'm using as scenes inside of Beatmaker 3, using those one-shots. I've got 3 live jams that I'm going to show you in this video, and they all follow the same workflow. We're going to start by going to scene mode. This is the 8 billion of us dub techno jam. I'll refamiliarize you in case you haven't heard it or if you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so it's that jam. I'll put a link to the video. And we're in scene mode in Beatmaker 3, and we can see that this jam is comprised of 9 scenes. And if we actually go over to scene mode, let's see here, we can see that each of these scenes is literally just one pattern because I'm only using the A1 bank. The whole song is just, or the whole jam rather, is just that bank, the track. And so what I'll do here is I'll show you some of the one-shots that I've used to build this jam. It's a set of 16, a set of 16 on top of that, and then a few more on top of that. So these are the one-shots that I'm using to build this dub techno jam. So literally what we have on the first 16 pads is just drum sounds, some chords, and some pads that I've arranged into these patterns, into these scenes. Some more hats, some more hats, lots of different like high-end stuff that I can use to fill up the high frequency spectrum, like metallic hats and shakers and ride, a nether shaker, really tiny percussion. More chord stabs. Something that's empty. That's cool. Reverse crash that I can use as sort of a riser sound. What I'll do is when I use a reverse crash, I'll put that in the same choke group as the crash. So as the reverse crash is building up to the downbeat and the crash hits on the downbeat, it will stop the reverse crash so that way they don't interfere with each other. I'll show you what I mean here. For instance, here's the reverse crash, and I don't have that on a choke group? No, I actually don't on this one. Well, that's surprising. Normally I would have done that. We got a down filter, a noise impact to like layer with the crash, or layer all 3. Another sort of impact you can layer, you know, any combination of these 4 items up here to get sort of a downbeat sizzle, crash, white noise kind of effect. Okay, these must be activated with the macro, which we'll get to in a little bit. But these are the one-shots that I'm using to build this particular jam with. It's not loops, it's just a whole bunch of one-shots that I've, you know, gone through in, in pattern mode here. Let's see here, yeah. and these are, you know, what the individual scenes look like. It's an 8-bar bunch of MIDI notes, you know, that just play back the different one-shots, you know, in different ways. So I build all of these scenes in pattern mode, okay, and then when I want to, you know, create the scenes per se, I'll just come over, I'll make sure that I'm labeling all of my patterns. So, you know, we have like the minimal dub, add claps to the minimal dub, we have the full dub, add hats, the rubber dub, the dooba dub, you know, stuff like that, that just it means a little something to me as to what I'm going to get when I play that scene. And then I will just literally, you know, drop the scenes, I will drop the patterns into the scene slots here. I'll go back to the pads, and it'll normally look like this, where the samples are here. And if you click scene, now those scene modes that we set up are available to play here. And because I label everything, it's labeled. So we have the minimal dub, add hats, add claps, and the full dub. So see, in order, that sort of makes sense, right? It's a minimal dub, we're going to add some hats to that, we're going to add some claps to these, and then here it's going to be the full dub. Over here is the rubber dub, we got a dooba dub, we got a rechilled 1 and a rechilled 2, just silly names and stuff for the scenes that help me keep some sort of reference in order when I'm playing back the jam. And then the final hit, which is something that I'm using a lot, actually, in pretty much all of these jams, this concept of when you're done jamming, you're going to, you know, need that outro per se to where the jam is done. Otherwise, how are you going to end the track? You might just press stop, but that might sound a little silly. You might do a fade out, but that might sound a little contrived. But I just put a downbeat on its own scene, and, you know, get myself a final hit that'll ring out. And of course it didn't work here. Something must have gone screwy with my scenes, and let's find out why. There it is. Not sure what that was. A little glitch there. Anyhow, when I'm playing the jam and whatnot from any of these scenes, say I'm doing some macro work and I'm jamming or whatnot, and I've, you know, brought the jam down to a real minimal state, at any time I can just hit that final hit scene. It'll ring out, and the track is, you know, sort of done at that point. And what I just need to be careful of is to not let it loop back around again. Or I guess I could have, you know, made that longer than 8 bars anyhow. But at this point I can press stop, and it feels like it's an official ending to the jam. So I'm using this sort of final downbeat outro hit on pretty much all of these live jams, so that I have something to go to as an official ending for the jams. As I'm creating the patterns and the scenes and making sure that they work real well, going back and forth between, you know, random ones, I'll start assigning some creative macros along the way. Like for instance, to this one, I've only used 5 of the 16 macros. I've got one labeled tweaky 1, I've got one labeled tune, I've got a big delay tweak, I've got one that adds some extra sounds to the mix, and I've got, you know, the note kick that I use in pretty much all my jams. So real quick, we'll just show you the note kick. You know, I can just use that as a quick turnaround at any time during the jam. You know, real self-explanatory. I put that in pretty much everything as a go-to. It helps with the arrangement and to keep that forward momentum as you're jamming. Here we have tweaky 1. So let's see what I've done here. I've sent some, this is going to adjust some filtering, the filter cutoff on something. It's going to adjust the amount of reverb that's going to something. It's going to adjust some EQ on something. So all sorts of different things are happening when I tweak this one particular knob. Let's see if we can hear it in the mix, something happening here. Well, this is a very subtle one, and it might depend on which scene is playing. Speaking of which, we can get right to this extra sounds. This one actually brings the gain up on some of the sounds, so I believe there's 3 scenes, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a few weeks since I did this jam. There's a few scenes here that when I bring up the macro for extra sounds, it actually adds a new element, which is a really, really interesting and cool way to be able to take the jam where you want it in real time, to not have everything directly on and going in all the scenes at the same time. So let's see if we can hear what this extra sounds is adding. Yeah, here we're adding, with the extra sounds, we're adding a hat and a clap, so we got this really minimal dub here, but I can extend that into sort of a double length section and keep interest by bringing in a hat and a clap using the extra sounds macro here. Okay, and how I would have done that is I would have just literally, picked what sound I want to, to add with that macro. I would have double clicked the gain, and it would have been done here at the bottom if I hadn't had it bound to a macro already. And then we would have, assigned that to the macro. I have a bunch of videos that go over how to assign the macros creatively. So let's see if I can show you what that extra sounds. I believe there's one in the rechilled scene. Yeah, so it's the same deal. It's going to allow me to add extra hats and a clap to, say, maybe loop this scene again and keep the interest going. A little percussion coming in there. So it's exactly, what I labeled it. It just brings in extra sounds. I didn't take the time to add extra sounds to every scene, which may have been, something that would have been really creative and fun to do, but these take quite a bit of time. I spend right now anywhere from a total of about 10 to 20 hours to put these whole things together, to find the right one shots, to do the mixing, to do the EQing that I'm using the FabFilter to help me visualize the frequencies. I just have this running in Ableton. I have an output from my Novation Audio Hub going into Ableton so I can see the frequencies and help me EQ a little bit, more specifically inside of Beatmaker 3. Unfortunately, I get a little bit of high frequency, bleed over, but it doesn't seem to affect the whole mix when I've got everything going. And it's certainly helpful to my workflow. And one more real quick, we have the big delay tweak on 3, and literally what this does is just turn the send up on the delays inside of the track itself. And again, I just have the one bank, which is how I'm building these, which makes the mixer section look really neat and orderly. But if you double click here on the bank label, you open up all the individual sounds. So here we have how I'm sending them to the effect sends for delay and for reverb, and you can see the ones that have numbers on them are ones that have been assigned to a macro. So when I'm moving macros, we're changing the amount of reverb or the amount of delay that the sounds have, and that's what this big delay tweak is doing here. It's just adding more delay to some of these sounds. So when I'm creating these, I sort of lay them out in the order that I might like to play them through, to eliminate possible confusion for me when I'm playing through these live, and allow me to think of other things to do while the sequence is going. For instance, in this jam, I have a second iPad that I'm using to play melodic elements and vocal samples in real time at the same time that this is going. So by eliminating a little bit of the error possibility and giving myself, some really well laid out scenes and some clever macros, I can keep the thought process during the jam to a relatively low level on the arrangement, because I make it so that pretty much any scene can go in and out of any scene. And if you're just creatively using the macros and paying attention to the timing, you can pretty much just jam it anywhere you want. And then you're just sort of feeling over the top of it where you might like to add the melodic macros, or say in this particular case, the vocal samples. Well, notice that scene 4 here is literally labeled full dub, and this is probably what I created first. What I'll do is I will just start loading one-shots in and creating a groove, and I'll just start adding as many different elements to that groove as I can. I'll EQ them very specifically in real time as I'm building the groove. I do it all as one homogeneous process, and I'll just keep adding as much as I can until I feel like this is, a really full, section here. And then from that'll usually take me an hour or two at least right there, which is why I don't do this stuff live on camera. Because there's just a lot of me, just sitting here with the EQ and adjusting frequencies, adjusting a little bit of panning and getting everything to sit where I want it to in the mix, and to where I'm just really, really, really happy with like an 8-bar groove. In this case, it was the full dub. And then I'll just start duplicating that, and I'll start maybe taking things away to create an intro. I may take some elements away and change some other elements and add a few more sounds in to create these other variations, like kind of an A section, a B section, and a C section sort of thing, to give the jam some legs and whatnot. I've loaded up a different jam now. This is the Forum Jam 01 piece, which is really sort of how I sort of stumbled upon this workflow, actually. It's just one bank and a bunch of one-shots, and then in pattern mode, I've programmed a bunch of patterns. I've labeled those, intro 1, intro 1.5, glitch groove, build up, turnaround, after the 4 on the floor, 4 on the floor 1, and there it is again, the final hit, which is that sort of outro extended ring out hit, basically. So what I've done here is I've just programmed macros that I can use creatively as these scenes are playing. You may remember this one, or I'll put a link to that to this video. But out of these macros, the ones that I was really getting the most out of is some of the sounds I've assigned the attack and the release to these macros here, so that the groove really changes, quite a bit depending on whether you're, you know what I'm saying? So I've got the release of the sounds on this macro, so that when I turn it up, the sounds extend a little bit more, and the mix becomes a little bit more full sounding. Then on the build-up section here, I'll go into that scene. What was really cool is I used the pitch down macro 3 here, and then bring it back up again. And this is just pitching down a whole bunch of the sounds. And again, I've showed in quite a few of my videos now how to actually assign stuff creatively to these macros. I'll put a link to the techno drums creative macros tutorial, which really gets into detail about how I'm assigning stuff. And it really just, you're only limited by your own creativity here with what you can assign to the macros. I'm using these scenes the same way in all 3 of these jams, just as an easy way to sort of help me keep a creative arrangement flowing the whole time, and then just being able to use the macros in real time. The Novation launch control I find works amazing for this workflow, because it's super portable, and you've got these 8 pads here, which easily correspond to the 8 scenes. So without actually excuse me, without actually touching the iPad, just using the launch control, I'm able to, to do these, and it's super portable. Can do these anywhere. In one of my recent videos, I made a drum kit for Beatmaker 3 by recording my acoustic drums, and I made some jams as examples of what could be made with the drum kit. This is a drum and bass example that I set up the exact same way. It's 8 scenes with a downbeat only as the as the backup for the final hit, and then I've assigned the macros creatively. You may recognize this one. Anyhow, one of the things that I thought was pretty creative on this one is I've actually got a full drum mix on the macros. I've assigned these macros on the right here to be no ride, no hats, no snares, and no kick. So at any time while this jam is playing out, I can really arrange and sculpt what is coming out here. This is really just the macros on the drum kit as they were for the most part that are included in that drum kit, which I am giving away on Patreon to all my patrons, even at the $1 level. So check that out if you're interested in these drums. But yeah, so basically it's literally just the drum kit, and then I start adding one-shots on top of that. And let me show you what I mean. So if you haven't heard what this kit sounds like, it's just my acoustic drums, okay, that I recorded. And then here's some of the one-shots. Shaker, pad, kind of a bass sound that I probably played melodically. I don't have my keyboard here, but if you go into keys mode, you can play any of these melodically. So I could go into keys mode, and this is really, I don't find the one bank part limiting. I found it quite a bit challenging at the beginning because I didn't quite understand this concept of, now it's a sort of a one shot for like a drum sound. And if you hit keys, now it's a melodic sound. That's sort of odd to me. Still is, but I've wrapped my brain around it to at least I'm able to get some use out of it now. I've added a riser, a bigger riser for when I want a bigger build up, bass drop. You might have to have headphones on. If you don't hear that, put your headphones on. And I've added some more stuff up here. A lot of these samples are from my reflective sample pack. In fact, most of these are actually. And again, here's a melodic sound. If I hit keys, I can play that melodically. But it's not set up polyphony-wise that way currently, because I'm just using it as a one-shot. But yeah, that's all I'm really doing here, guys, is I'm just taking the time to, find the right, samples from my collection or from my personal samples from Electronisounds. And I'm just building and building and building. Usually, 2 to 3 16 sections full of samples, so we're at, quite a bit of sounds, quite a bit of samples that I have to work with. And I'm just taking the time to, to program all these different patterns and all these different scenes. If we go here into, the, pattern mode, it's the same as I showed you earlier. They're all just a bunch of MIDI that tell those, one shots when to play. And it just takes takes a lot of time to sit there, and sometimes I play stuff in live. Sometimes I'll sit here and I'll zoom in on the, grid, get my 16th notes in and just put that stuff in. I might do some velocity stuff. In fact, there I did some on there, you can see here. it just takes time. Yeah, it just takes time. But I mean, you can see from these jams what I'm able to get out of this, and I'm really enjoying this workflow. I'm going to continue working in this sort of a workflow to hopefully maybe get enough of these going that I might be able to do like an actual live set. I have 2 iPad Air 2s now. I have 2 launch controls. So in theory, with a lot more hard work and a lot more creativity, there could be an all Beatmaker 3 live set. Not a live jam, but a full live set in the future, maybe. That's something that I have never done before. So maybe a personal challenge that I'm sort of seeing if I can't work up to here. I just want to show these last 2 scenes real quick because I've been working on them a little bit. Anyways, I just want to stress one last time the importance of the concept of this downbeat only outro. So like no matter where I'm at in the jam and no matter what I'm doing, I've got a definitive ending ready to go. I've showed it a lot in my other videos, but just real quick, I want to, for maybe those of you who haven't seen, explain why I have the FabFilter ProQ plugin here. Because with this and the way that I have it, just the headphone out from my Novation Audio Hub, which the iPad Air is plugged into, I have that just going into the input of my Ableton on the laptop, so that we can get a visual representation of the frequencies of the sounds as I'm working with the samples, and what I'll do is I'll use this feature inside of FabFilter ProQ, where it literally will freeze the EQ spectrum and say, like, if there's a peak that maybe I'm not vibing too much, like that one right there, for instance, I might, take the mouse and go up and find the frequency of that. It's 1108 hertz, so 1108 hertz, and then I might come over to, Beatmaker 3 and put an EQ and tame that frequency on that channel at 1108 hertz, and then I would be able to visually see that I did it here. It's just an extra level of anal geekery, producery nonsense that really helps in my workflow. If I can't visualize the sounds as I'm working, I have a little bit of frustration, so this really helps me. Hey guys, I know this was a long one. Thanks for sticking with me. We covered a lot today. I hope that you get a lot of information that you can use for building live jams out of this. This is just one of the things that I think Beatmaker 3 really excels at, and this is certainly the thing that is making me most excited about Beatmaker 3, is using it for these live jams in this way. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe for more Beatmaker 3 shenanigans.
Dean's here. 18. Dean Dawson, the ultimate in music production on BM3.